Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here with us today. We're going to be taking a really focused, advanced look at a truly foundational concept in the world of process improvement and organizational excellence. Today, we're unpacking the mechanical details and the rigorous execution of the traditional DMAIC framework. Now, if you're operating in a high-stakes environment, managing complex enterprise systems, overseeing massive supply chains, or engineering highly scalable software, you already know that surface-level tweaks, they just don't cut it anymore. When systemic flaws are threatening your operational integrity, you've got to systematically break those issues apart and solve them permanently. So throughout this explainer, we're going way beyond the basic definitions. We're going to dive really deep into the operational mechanics, the specific tools, and the data-driven philosophies that actually power this framework. We'll explore exactly how elite teams rely on these classic methods to essentially re-architect systems for zero defects.
But before we get into the specific terminology and all the step-by-step breakdowns, I want you to just take a second and consider the reality of complex organizational issues through this one overarching question. What is the essential problem-solving approach? Think about it. When enterprise-level systems break down, or say a manufacturing line consistently produces this massive yield loss, chaos usually ensues, right? So what is the bedrock method that elite high-performing teams return to time and time again to just cut through all that noise? What actually separates organizations that scale flawlessly from the ones that are constantly plateauing? Well, I'll tell you what it isn't. It's definitely not about guessing or just brainstorming over whiteboards or, throwing incredibly expensive solutions at a wall to see what sticks. Instead, there's a precise, unrelenting, and highly structured path that acts as the absolute gold standard for navigating deep-rooted inefficiencies. It's really all about moving your culture from reactive firefighting to the proactive, systemic eradication of errors.
Okay, let's dive into this. The answer to that question, it lies in the rigorous methodology known as Six Sigma. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but Six Sigma isn't just some corporate buzzword or a generic management trend. It's explicitly defined as an essential, classic problem-solving approach, mostly because it mathematically demands near perfection. We're talking about reducing variance to the point where you have no more than 3.4 defective parts per million opportunities, literally almost zero. It provides the overarching architecture for exactly how professionals tackle process variation. It completely shifts an organization's focus from just fixing mistakes as they pop up to systematically identifying the root causes of variation and stopping them before they even happen. It's a philosophy that's rooted entirely in rigorous statistical analysis and an absolutely unyielding focus on customer requirements. Basically, Six Sigma is the foundational, data-driven leadership philosophy that guides us from spotting a fundamental flaw all the way to engineering an irrefutable, mathematically sound, and highly sustainable solution.
So how do we actually put that into practice? That's where we need to translate the massive theoretical weight of the Six Sigma philosophy into a ruthless, repeatable execution engine. Because let's be honest, a philosophy of perfection is pretty much meaningless if you don't have a rigorous step-by-step engine to drive it. And that brings us to unpacking the DMAIC acronym. This exact acronym is absolutely crucial because it structures the entire problem-solving journey. DMAIC bridges that critical gap between identifying a systemic failure and executing a mathematically sound solution. It basically takes all those heavy statistical concepts of the classic Six Sigma approach and distills them into a really tangible, actionable roadmap that literally any process improvement team can follow. It is the tactical engine of execution. So let's break this down and see how it builds into specific, actionable phases that you can apply directly to your own workflows right now.
All right, here we go. The classic DMAIC methodology laid out step by step. Number 1, define. And honestly, this isn't just writing up some vague problem statement. The define phase is about drafting ironclad project charters. It's where you map the high-level process, often using tools like a SIPOC diagram to clearly outline suppliers, inputs, process outputs, and customers. But most importantly here, you are ruthlessly identifying the voice of the customer, or the VOC. What exactly are the critical to quality characteristics? Because if you don't define the parameters of success strictly from the customer's perspective, the rest of the project is entirely useless. Number 2, measure. Because you literally cannot fix what you cannot accurately measure. This phase is all about establishing a rigorous mathematical baseline. So you aren't just gathering random data, you're calculating your current process capability, establishing your baseline sigma level, and creating really detailed data collection plans. And crucially, this is where you validate your measurement system itself, often through something like a gauge R&R study, just to ensure that the data you're collecting isn't inherently flawed by the way you're measuring it. Number 3, analyze. Okay, this is where the heavy lifting truly happens. We're moving from just observing the what to mathematically proving the why. Your team is going to utilize root cause analysis, hypothesis testing, ANOVA, failure mode and effects analysis, the whole shebang. You aren't just guessing at what causes the defect, you are statistically proving the relationship between variables. You're looking to isolate those vital few input variables, the X's, that definitively dictate the outcome of your Y. Number 4, improve. So now that you've got statistical proof of your root causes, you design and test solutions based purely on that data. Elite teams are going to use design of experiments, or DOE, to mathematically optimize those input variables. And you don't just roll out a massive change all at once. You pilot the solution, you implement risk mitigation strategies, and you prove statistically that the improvement actually worked in a controlled environment before you ever commit to a full-scale rollout. And finally, number 5, control. This is arguably the most critical step, and honestly the one where people fail the most. Once you improve a process, human nature and just, well, systemic entropy are going to try to pull it back to its old inefficient ways. So the control phase institutes strict statistical process control charts. It involves creating detailed standard operating procedures, comprehensive training docs, and really robust response plans. You're locking in the gains to ensure that your data-driven solution actually holds up over the long term, cementing a permanent, brand new standard of efficiency.
Now let's just pause for a second to really contextualize the historical way and the proven track record of this framework. We've been using these 3 specific descriptors: traditional, essential, and classic. But why exactly has DMAIC earned these titles? Well, simply put, because it has an irrefutable track record of success. Just think about the origins of Six Sigma over at Motorola back in the 1980s. It literally saved the company billions of dollars. Or think about its famous adoption by GE under Jack Welch, which completely transformed their entire global manufacturing and services landscape. This framework is classic because it completely ignores fleeting corporate fads in favor of hard mathematics and logic. It's traditional because it represents the established, proven bedrock of industrial and operational engineering. And it is absolutely essential because variance is the enemy of scale. For any organization out there looking to grow sustainably without just multiplying its errors, the strict discipline of the DMAIC methodology is an absolute requirement. It stood the test of time across manufacturing, healthcare, finance, tech, you name it. Which brings us to our final takeaway for today, and a pretty provocative question that I really want to challenge you with. How will you apply this classic problem-solving approach we've just completely unpacked the engine of DMAIC together? From rigorously identifying that voice of the customer in the define phase, all the way through to locking in those permanent gains with statistical charts in the control phase. So, as you step away from this explainer today, I want you to critically evaluate the processes in your own daily operations. Where is your team currently relying on guesswork instead of rigorous measurement? Where are you just fighting fires instead of actually analyzing the root causes? And most importantly, how can applying the strict, data-driven discipline of the traditional DMAIC framework turn that guesswork into guaranteed, scalable growth? Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this comprehensive explainer. Keep measuring, keep analyzing, keep seeking clarity, and I will see you next time.